Welcome to Geared for Growth. I'm your host, Mike Mortlock from MCG Quantity Surveyors. Now, you're probably aware that we are in a bit of a national rental availability crisis and affordability crisis, and there were some announcements to Commonwealth rent assistance to remove some of that pressure in the recent budget, but the vast majority of people won't qualify for that. So today we're talking to Jake Stojcevski from the Renter's Agent, who gives some interesting insights for people that are looking for a rental property at the moment. We know that one of the biggest cohorts of new investors are in that younger age bracket that are more likely to rent vest. So he gives us some tips on how to put your best foot forward. Also some advice for landlords and the types of renovations and inclusions that they're putting in their property, where the money is or the smart money is for those improvements, and what people are looking for in their rental property, and how that actually differs from owner occupiers as well. He also gives some great insights in the types of questions to ask property managers if you're looking at hiring them to look after your investment property. It's an awesome interview with Jake, and here he is here. Thanks for joining me on Geared for Growth.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
I paused before pronouncing your surname because I was a bit nervous, but I think I got it right in the end.
Yeah, you got it right. Yep. All good.
So the reason why I wanted to get you on the show, and it's sort of connected to a little bit of a personal story where I became a rent vestor very recently after living in a principal place of residence for nearly a decade, sort of making a little bit of a tweak to a different location. And I had one hell of a time, but not because you represented me. This is a bad advertisement for your service, but it speaks more to the market that we're in, the national rental crisis. And what I really wanted to unpack is, some of the experiences that we had working together and what you're seeing in the marketplace as well. And you're a rent vestor yourself. And we can see from the banking data that the greatest cohort of investors right now is actually in a younger age brackets, around that sort of 25 to 35, whereas traditionally we would talk more about boomers being the quintessential investors. So there's quite a lot in it, I think, for rent investors in this story, and also for landlords to understand if they're looking for a tenant, what's going on the other side of the fence. So Jake, thanks for joining me today. How would you categorize the rental market at the moment?
It's a bit crazy right now. I guess a few things that we spoke about before was, for example, the processes when it comes to applying for a property, and then what you're seeing from a tenant's perspective, and then from an owner's side of things. So, for example, like one of your examples for yourself was, you have a great application there, the owner's happy, the agent's happy, but the owner still wants to hold another open home to see what else they can get. So we do see this quite often, and it's hard to understand because an owner won't always specify. Some people will say it's because they might get offered some more money. Others will say that maybe they're looking for a particular type of tenant. So say someone has a dog or kids or whatnot there, if they could get one person in there or a couple and there's less wear and tear on the property, they will preference that type of application at the moment because of the amount of choice that they have. We do also see the rent prices at the moment. Obviously, they're skyrocketing, and that does cause a bit of concern because people's wages haven't increased, but prices have. So it's trying to find that middle ground there between how do we keep things affordable, but also keep in mind an owner's got skyrocketing interest rates and costs that they can't hold on to. So then if they can't, they have to sell the property, which then makes the issue even worse because we don't have a lot of investors coming into the market, and we haven't for some time. So it's about figuring, I feel like we're on the precipice of a solution, but we're just not quite there yet because there's just a few little missing pieces between everything, which, puts a strain on the market.
The politicians are just talking ad nauseum about supply in terms of new construction coming online, and we can see the pipeline of high density construction projects, so the big unit complexes which can come onto the market and add huge supply quickly, they're very, very diminished. And of course, we're at about decade lows of housing starts. But outside of building new homes, there's supply metrics that happen that have nothing to do with new things being built, but more to do, as you say, as investors coming onto the market or investors selling from the market. And I think we've definitely seen in the data that there's been a lot of investors selling, particularly in places like Queensland and Victoria, which have had their land tax battles. And we're also seeing, less people coming onto the market as well, because it seems like the state politicians are actually not recognizing the role of investors. They're actually kind of demonizing investors. Do you see that feeding into the market?
100%. And also when we talk about construction, building high rises is a mistake because since COVID, one of the lessons that we have found and is quite prominent is work from home options for employees.
Mm,
People don't want to be cramped in an apartment after being in lockdown for so long.
mm,
So the types of housing we need are bigger houses, 3, 4 bedrooms. Yes, we do need a supply of apartments, but that's not where the demand really is. People need space. You've got people that come up from Sydney. They still have their jobs in Sydney, but Newcastle has that lifestyle, the beaches, laid back, and it's less than 2 hours drive. They're coming up to live in Newcastle while also working there. They're not coming up to live in an apartment. They want to live in a nice big 4 bedroom home with some land where they've got a couple of office spaces within their home. So when we're
mm,
talking about construction, it also needs to address what type of construction we're building because high rises shouldn't be the only focus.
mm.
Because then we're going to have an oversupply and still have a shortage because it's not the exact housing we need. Um, and in terms of, sorry, the other part that you mentioned about that too, you spoke about construction and
Yeah, investors are
our
selling and
investors.
investors
Yeah,
aren't purchasing, and of course we need them to be purchasing the type of stock that's in demand for tenants, right?
yeah. And I guess that's so with the government, there needs to be some incentive for an investor. There just hasn't been a lot around at the moment. I heard on the ABC someone mentioned about limiting one property per household,
Mhm.
which I mean, does that fix a problem? Not so much. Investment is a good thing. If you have that opportunity to be able to buy and then put someone in there, why aren't we encouraging more of that? Obviously,
Mm,
not everyone's in a position where they can buy, so we need to have an influx of properties coming in for people who will be long-term renters. Some people will never
mm.
buy, they will never be in that position their whole life. So we need to be injecting more properties into the market for sure.
Yeah, I think we can go back multiple decades and see the average percentage of people renting is around about a third over that huge time period, and that's very unlikely to change. And something that I think people sometimes think, oh, you only rent because you can't do X, Y, Z, you can't buy. But you and I rent investors. There's a lot.
Hmm.
We've seen a huge increase in international migrants who tend not to
Hmm.
buy straight away because they kind of want to get the lay of the land and see, is this the sort of place where I want to be, where I'm going to stay, where I need to live, because their visa requirement might put them in a region but they've got family in a capital city, so there's always going to be that kind of demand. Now you
Hmm.
work in Sydney and in Newcastle, and essentially you're a buyer's agent for tenants, as people might be more familiar with buyers agents than rental agents.
Hmm.
Where are you seeing the main demand from a price point and house type in Sydney and Newcastle at the moment?
So Sydney's a little bit more expensive, but in Newcastle, it's definitely in that 400 to 600 range. It's absolutely flooded.
Yep,
In Sydney, if we add another 150 to $200 on top of that for their mid-range there. That's
yep,
where the whole market is. In the higher range, I'm also heavily involved in the NDIS space where we provide supported independent living options for those providers. So they're taking on those bigger homes where all those new build constructions are happening and they're
yep.
paying that higher price point, which is good because some of the general population can't afford those types of houses, and you're
Mm,
also providing housing for people that don't have anywhere to go. So I think that's a really great model as well to help take off the housing sector. Um, And we're also just finding, like you were mentioning with international students, we do have a lot of international students come through to the renters agent and they want apartments. So all
Mm,
these apartments that are in the city CBD center or near the universities, most of them are housed by these international students. So there's definitely a demand there as well.
mm,
And once again, the higher price point, because they're funded by their governments over there, and the government funding is completely different to what we have in Australia, they can easily afford these brand new apartments that are put at high prices. So it's also a win-win for those owners because they're getting a great return on the property that they bought, even in this market too.
mm.
So, so there's lots of opportunities everywhere. It's just about fitting the right people to the right properties and right opportunities.
Mm. And one thing that we certainly witnessed is what I would consider some structural inefficiencies. So there was one particular property that remains vacant to today, but we actually just couldn't get an answer on an application. Of course, there's another ones where we had an application in that they were seemingly happy for. One which I took rather personally, they then made another open home which no one showed up to, and you sort of said, "Oh, we might get some good news on this one," given that they wanted to try again and no one showed up. But they actually reduced the price. So
Mm,
not only was I declined, but they reduced the price. So there was something about my application that the real estate or the owner didn't like.
mm,
And outside of that, I mean, you've talked about, okay, it might be something about their idea about the wear and tear that I might put on the property, but outside of that, it kind of seems like the process is a lot longer than it should be. I mean, that
mm,
was really kind of adding to vacancy. So, with a vacancy rate, the last print went up 0.1% to 1.1, which is still probably at least half of a almost balanced market. Do
mm.
you feel like there are structural inefficiencies that are making that supply a little bit tighter just with the time it takes to process applications?
I actually think it comes down to miscommunication or lack of communication because, for example, no one wants to say a reason why the owner's declining because it's discrimination, right? So
Mm,
sometimes if I'm told a certain reason, I have to be careful how I disclose that to my client. However, I don't see an issue with it when we're being open, upfront, and honesty, and it's saving that person time so they can move on to another option. I
mm,
think that needs to be more so. So, for example, if you're a type of tenant, even though there's nothing wrong with you, if the owner was just burnt by that particular person,
mm,
they then see you be in a similar position, even if you're 100% spectacular, everything ticks off. They're going to be hesitant to approve you because of their last experience. Now, I
mm,
understand that from an owner's perspective, but it's about that transparency and being upfront. I don't think there's anything wrong in disclosing that information because it helps you to not hold on false hope. You can
mm,
move on to something else. So, when we're talking about inefficiencies in the process, I just think those things lacking. Everyone's all about doing things through virtual assistants and whatnot.
mm,
Now I'm going to say something a little bit controversial here. I'm old school. I believe in you pick up the phone, you speak to someone. We waste so much time by having everything automated. Yes, some practices can be, but when you're leasing a property, that cannot be automated over a screen.
mm,
That is a process that needs to be done with face-to-face service. So for example, instead of someone picking up the phone and going, hey, we need this, 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 you get a generic email sent out. You might miss it. You could be busy and things like that there. You're not checking things as constantly. Whereas, say, if you have a representation with a renter's agent like myself, the agent or owners can call me direct, and in 2 minutes, I will have the problem solved instead of sending out an email and everyone just waiting, going
mm.
back and forth that way. That's an inefficient process.
Yeah.
I don't agree with it. I've been in the leasing process before from a property side of things, and I would get on the phone. I would pick up the phone. So if I said, Mike, I need this, I'm going to call you.
Yeah.
I'm not going to send you an email. You're busy. What happens if you don't get to the email till later that night? We lost that whole day. Even if
Yeah.
you're in a meeting, you go, Jake, I'm in a meeting. I'll call you back in an hour. Or you go, can you text me? I go, yeah, hey, Mike, I just need you to send me this. give me 2 seconds, you're on your computer, you email it through to me. I've
Yeah,
solved
yeah.
the problem in 2 minutes. And that's a part of the service when we're doing applications for our clients. That's what I'm doing for the clients. I'm that middleman sorting everything out without dragging that process. Unfortunately, sometimes we can't get answers quickly. So it might be that because each agent has their own way of processing, they're not all the same. Everyone processes their applications differently. So some agents will be quicker than others. That's just a given. But then some owners might take time too. Some owners don't have urgency. Some owners go hold another open. They might be overseas. They might just not be in a rush. They go, oh, it's okay. It doesn't matter if it takes a couple of weeks. It's all good. No worries. And you're sitting on the other side going, but I need a house. Like,
Yeah.
I can't wait 2 weeks for you to come back to me.
Mm.
So it's miscommunication, I believe, as well as the inefficiencies, it's miscommunication.
Do you think that there are instances where it's just become a little bit too difficult for investors in the rental space? We've seen some big changes with Victoria, the minimum standards legislation, and obviously at some of these higher price points, they actually kind of think, look, we'd rather just leave it vacant than drop the price. Do you see
Mm,
some instances where these people could be incentivized, or let's say disincentivized, with vacancy taxes to bring some more supply onto the marketplace? I guess it's a fine balance between owning an asset and getting to decide whatever it is you want to do with it, and that also being supply that is important for the fabric of our society. The Geared for Growth Property Investing podcast is presented by our business, MCG Quantity Surveyors. If you're an investor or a property professional looking to get the best tax depreciation deductions for yourself or your clients, please get in touch with us at mcgqs.com.au. It's our mission to help as many property investors as we can to maximise their claims and maximise their property education as well.
mm. A tax is an interesting point because I feel like if owners are going to get taxed on vacancy, it might stop them from wanting to purchase. So uh, that one's a hard one because I don't know how well that would go down. The other thing is it's the type of application you've got. So I don't think owners should desperately just take anyone in their property, because if they're not going to pay their rent, they damage that. That's their
Yep.
investment, their hard-earned investment. I don't think they should be forced to rent it to anyone. And I guess this is where agents come in. They're employed, and that's their area of expertise to help the owner with that, to go through and really look for that right application presented to the owner. So if the agent's doing that, and then the owner's being unreasonable with it, maybe then we can look into a tax to go, look, you've employed my service as an agent to say that you want to rent it. Now you're stuffing me around, you're wasting my time. We've got people that want it, you're not doing anything there. Maybe at that point, a tax is implemented because they're not taking it seriously. However, if you've got an owner who starts at a higher price and they're listening to their agent and the agent's guiding them through the whole process and they're dropping it with the increments as advised there, but they're just not getting the best tenant for the property, I don't have an issue with that. That's not where it is. It's the ones that aren't really listening to what the advice is. If you're gonna do it yourself and privately manage it, do whatever you want. That's fine. But when you're getting an expert in there and then you're not following it and it's wasting everyone's time when someone desperately wants it, maybe something needs to be implemented at that point. How do you regulate that? I don't know.
That's a whole other episode. Now, I really enjoyed the fact that I don't know how many applications we had on properties, but I never submitted one of them. That had a huge value to me. But also the connections that you had personally with property managers in different locations where you can say, what have you got that matches this description? I mean, that we hear about with off-market transactions in the real estate space, but it's kind of seems a bit crazy with such low vacancies that could happen today. But I guess you still have that front row seat to what's coming up. For people that are rent vesting, or there might even be people that are renters that listen to this podcast, what's your best advice for putting the best foot forward in your application?
Um, Cover letters, I know everyone's encouraged to do one. I don't think they're necessary
Mm,
because, to be honest, it's not reaching the right person that it needs to. And a lot of the times the agents won't read it because there's so many applications, they're busy and they won't get a chance there. So being there and being present is the most important thing.
mm.
I guess through the renters agent service, we are your cover letter for you.
Yeah.
So you're getting that representation from myself and my team. Now, if you so if you can't get there, for example, say you're interstate or you're overseas or you're working and you can't make an inspection that's at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, well, of course, by having us there, we're representing you. But if
Mm,
you're at the open, people go, I am going there and I'm having a discussion with that agent. A lot of the times, the person showing the property doesn't have anything to do with the property. They could be just the person opening up the doors for someone to show applicants through. Whereas the person you need to be speaking to is the property manager who's at the office, and they're the ones that are dealing direct with the owner. So, say you give that big introduction to them,
mm,
that's never going to get passed on to the owner.
mm.
So that's a challenge, even if people are going to the inspection themselves. But relationships, this is over 10 years. I've built these connections for a long, long time. So
Mm.
these agents that I'm dealing with, I know them on more than just a business level. We have that respect, we have that long-standing relationship that we've built. And it does go for something because we can be open and honest and transparent. We can just pick up the phone. If they have any questions or concerns, they can ask me. I can answer that for them, and vice versa. So, and as the transactions go through, it's like building a portfolio. We've had that many dealings with each other that we both understand what each other's expectations are. And
Mm.
that's a big value add because I'm not saying that an agent just I call someone and say, can I have this property? And they go, yeah, you can have whatever you want. That's not the truth about it. You still have to meet requirements. It's not just me giving someone bad to an agent or an owner. They still have to meet that. And
Mm.
then it's just that we have that advantage in terms of the relationship that's already built there. The owner still makes the decision. The agent still has to make a decision as well, but it helps when you're not going in cold when you're dealing with someone. So
Yeah.
that's a big advantage in a market like this right now for sure.
Yeah, so I guess there's almost like gatekeepers to the person that's the day-to-day contact with the landlord, and I guess if you want to impress someone, you want to make sure it's the person that's actually going to communicate that back to the landlord. What about on the other side of the fence? So this podcast is mostly subscribed by landlords. For
Mhm.
people that are, you know, looking to change tenants, or they've bought a new investment property and they're kind of interested in, all right, well, how do I get the pricing right? What sort of tenant is going to be best for me? Is there any advice that you can provide in and around that for investors?
They can give me a call if they want. No, because like I said, I have expertise in property management beforehand. So I
Yep.
do have owners that reach out and go, Jake, do you have anyone for this? Can we do something off market? I'd like to do it without advertising, but then can you recommend anyone? And I've got a great network of agents that I work with day to day. And I do pass owners on and say, look, I've already found a tenant for this property. Would you like to manage it? Here's the contact details. And I put them there. In contact with each other. So we do that quite often. But
Yep.
I can give advice on price because I know the market. So
Yep.
if anyone's asking me those questions, I'm happy to do so. For example, if I had an owner the other day and they have a furnished property right now, beautiful property close to the CBD, and they want a top price for that, which is fine, but we're going into winter. Winter's not a furnished market. So when
Mm.
I'm speaking to owners like that, I understand they can't dictate when it's becoming available, but I have that discussion to go, if I was you, I would be doing a 6 month lease, get it back to summer. So you're going to
Mm.
have to take a loss for 6 months. You're not going to get the top price, but that's fine. Once the lease ends, you can do an increase to what market rent is in the peak of the market in January, where you will get top dollar for furnished. And then from there, you will extend and do 12 months at a time. So if the tenant does move out, it's always coming up at the peak of the market. So the types of
Mm.
advice that I can give to landlords is, I know from that side too, and I have these discussions with landlords. They they don't have to manage with anyone. They can do it themselves.
Yep.
But I might have a tenant for them, and if they do want to go down that path, I have really great agents that I'm working with that are really well informed, very like experienced in this field that can then manage it. So we have a community together, and I like to keep it in the community because I want to know if we're passing on people to each other, it's people we trust.
Yes.
So that's also very, very important. So for landlords, it's just asking the right questions.
Mm.
What kind of tenant would I be attracting? What price would I get in this market? What lease period should I be taking? It's about asking whoever you're speaking to those questions. That's
Yeah, I was just
important.
about to say, of course, if you're interested in Sydney and Newcastle, you
Mm,
can talk to Jake. We have no financial arrangement other than you looked after me and did a good job. But for someone that's in Brisbane or Melbourne, yeah, that's the advice, right? So speak to the
mm,
property managers and say, where is the demand? What sort of person would apply for this? What sort of lease term would they like? Is this the right time of year to market this property to
mm.
its maximum potential? Are those the main conversations to help you kind of get clear on it? If you've already engaged a PM or you're shopping around for a PM, they should have good answers to those questions.
Yeah, so for a landlord, you should never be considering who's the cheapest because if you do that, you're going to get the worst service, and I guarantee you're going to be unhappy in a couple of months, and you're going to go back to the person you should have gone with in the first place. It happens all the time. So,
Mm,
for example, owners are renovating a property, right? From a renter's perspective, let's see what's important to a renter. Built-in wardrobes is actually massive. If you're considering doing something there, put a built-in in. Guarantee you adds value to what a renter's looking for. When we're talking in terms of kitchens and bathrooms, people do like a more of a renovated, modern-looking kitchen, bathroom. A laundry, people generally don't care about that. So what it's like what you're looking for in terms of things. Owners leaving storage, their things in storage and not having a garage available. That is something that we are seeing all the time. If you've got a garage and it's a family home, the tenant looking for it, they do not want to take that property at top market value when they don't have access to a garage and storage. As
mm,
the owner, that's your responsibility to store it elsewhere. If you are leasing the property, lease it in full.
yeah.
There's little things like this, air conditioning and ceiling fans. A lot of people are wanting those things as well. So even asking those questions, hey, I'm thinking about doing a little bit of work on it. I'm thinking at this price, in the condition it's in right now, what price would I get? Then they go, oh, but I've just put $10,000 worth of renovations in here. I want $100 a week more. It doesn't
Yeah.
work like that.
Mm,
Save your money, only do the things necessary because you're going to put all this money for things that renters don't need and you're
mm,
not going to get the return on it. So some people uh, aren't asking the right questions around that either. Because from an owner's perspective, that's one of the questions I'd be asking before I do anything. What price would I get now or after renovation? And if it's only $10 more, you don't need to do this full renovation. You're not going to get the return on it because the renter, it's not their home that they bought. They're just renting it. They
yeah.
just want those necessities. They want to know there's
Yes.
an air conditioning in there. They want to know there's built-in so they don't have to get their own wardrobes and they've got some storage. They might want a dishwasher. It's just those little things. They want storage so that they don't have to go get a storage unit because that's an
Mm,
additional cost for themselves. And if the storage is taken, they want a reduction on the rent, right? So
yes.
all these things, as well as your lease period, the type of tenant you'd be attracting, and whatnot, they are the important questions to be having, whether it's with myself or whether it's with a property manager, because we can give that advice. And when you're thinking about who manages your investment, I think that's what you need to be looking at, not what someone's offering you in terms of management fees.
Yeah, not about the like, is it 8% or 3.5 with a few add-ons? It's like, well, who actually feels like they're going to be the right person guide the decisions I make about finding the right tenant and finding the demographic that is chasing my property and what they're looking for in it, right? And I guess there's a parallel between what a tenant's looking for and what a potential purchaser might look for. Now, you might think, I'm not going to sell this for 10 or 20 years, but at the end of the day, you may need a valuer to come in and value that property to use that equity to do something else with it. So it makes sense to align it with, well, what do actually people want? And I think, would you say that tenants and owner occupiers have kind of the same wants in common?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what I was some of the things I was going on about beforehand. If I'm buying this property that I want to live in my family home, I don't want half renovated. I'm not
Yep.
interested in that. If I'm going to have a beautiful kitchen, a beautiful bathroom, I want a beautiful living area too, and I probably do want a beautiful laundry. If
Right.
I'm renting the property, I want an internal laundry, correct. Do I need it to be brand new, fancy, freshly painted and everything in there? I couldn't care less. That's
Yeah.
not relevant to me. If I'm coming from Queensland where it's super hot, yeah, or you get people that come from the UK, it's the funniest thing ever. They can't handle the heat here. So if there's no air conditioning in a property, they go, I can't. There's no way I can be in here, right?
Yeah.
So it's what are people looking for? A lot of international clients that I have, they need gas cooking because cooking is quite important for their culture. So if
Yeah.
it's electric cooktops, they won't take it. So something as small as that, they want a gas stovetop. They also don't want anything without built-ins. So in Australia, I find built-ins isn't exactly the most important thing. Not many people put that on the list of requirements. But for some of these international cultures, they won't take a property if there isn't a built-in in there. Even though you can get a wardrobe for $20 from Kmart, they say no to it because they want that built-in. So it's about knowing the market of who you're going to attract, who's going to be in here, to then work out what you need in the property and how you can add value from it on that perspective. So if I'm getting my property ready to sell or I'm getting my property ready to rent, I'm doing two completely different things. I'm not doing the same. I wouldn't be doing the same thing.
That is very interesting, and I think great advice for landlords is that the valuer might be looking to something different to the tenant at the end of the day. The valuer is important, but the tenant is that ongoing cash flow, and not many investors can afford to hold a property that's vacant for too long or is, really under efficient in the way that it's attracting people. So some awesome advice there, Jake. I'd love to touch base with you in a couple of years, hopefully when we aren't at 1.1% national vacancy rates, just to see what's changed. But thanks very much for sharing all of that golden wisdom today.
No, of course. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share it. I appreciate it.
Of course. Cheers.
All right. Thanks, mate.